Jesus was the master of asking really good questions, but you and I can learn how to ask the same kinds of questions. I want to give you some types of questions that you can use in making disciples, but the underlying character trait you need to develop is simply curiosity. See, if you don't develop an inner curiosity, you're going to bypass a very important aspect of discipleship, self-discovery. See, there are three parts to the disciple-making process. There's your part as the disciple maker, there's God's part, and then there's the person that you're discipling. They have a part as well. Make sure you stick to your part and don't try to do their part for them, and trust God that He's going to do His part. That being said, the first type of question is really important in everyday conversations, but it's very important as well in a small group setting. Using a hook question is helpful to bring a conversation from a very casual conversation into a spiritual conversation. It's called a hook question because it's just like a hook in fishing. You put the bait on it to draw someone to the thing that you want to talk about. So if I wanted to hook someone into a conversation, say about the story of Jesus walking on the water in Matthew chapter 14, I might ask something like, have you ever experienced something so incredible that you really didn't know how to respond in the moment? Now, normally I would say don't ask just a yes or no question like that because it doesn't invite discussion, but this type of question, you can ask it in such a way that people, they know that you want to hear about that experience. And honestly, most people want to tell you this story anyway, right? So after you listen to the story that they share with you, you have two things going for you. You know more about this person and your relationship got a little bit deeper. And second, you now have an easy segue into a story or a truth about spiritual things. So this is a great place for you to learn how to tell Bible stories. Just as you read stories, practice telling them to your kids, to your friends, to other people in maybe your discipleship group. Practicing telling these stories is so valuable for just everyday life. But if I were to tell the story of Jesus walking on the water, and I'm not going to tell it right now, but I would do my best to use my own words, but tell the story as accurately as possible so that I'm not changing the scriptures. But you can also simply just read the passage of scripture. Now, if you're with an unbeliever and you don't know the story really well, you can simply share truth with them, right? The truth that, hey, God asks us to do crazy things sometimes that require us to trust Him. So whatever you're doing, you use a hook question to bring them in. You present them with some sort of biblical concept. Maybe it's a Bible story. Maybe you read a passage of scripture. Maybe it's some biblical truth. And a great follow-up question to something like this is a head question. Now, a head question gets people processing information in their mind. See, these are your who, what, when, and where questions. So if you're talking about a Bible story, it might be asking questions that help the person remember the order of the details or the characters and the plot of the story. Now, for the story of Jesus walking on the water, I might ask a creative question like, as you envisioned that story in your head, where were you? See, our mind does this weird thing when we hear a story where it places us somewhere. You know, I've heard people talk about, in specific with that story, yeah, I was in the boat with the disciples as I was envisioning this. Or I was on the beach watching from afar. Or I was like a drone hovering above this whole situation, watching it go on. Again, our minds are incredible at putting us in a certain place in the story. So that's a great question. But you might ask something else, like, what were the disciples feeling during this story? It actually tells us that. Or what did Peter say to Jesus when he realized who it was that was walking on the water? These are factual or informational questions, and they help someone process the information that they just received. So you can do this with just about anything, even asking, hey, what did you hear me say? That's a head question. So hook questions, they help us bring someone into a spiritual conversation, a disciple-making conversation. Head questions help people process information, specifically the spiritual information, again, in the context of a disciple-making conversation, right? So in the next video, we're going to look at heart questions and hands questions, but again, starting with a hook question. Now, you might be in the middle of a conversation when you drop a hook question. Use that hook question to bring them into a spiritual conversation, and then ask some head questions. That's a perfect way to begin a spiritual conversation with someone and really help them get a step closer to Jesus. So these are, again, very important tools. And I want you to remember, again, you only have your part that you can focus on. You can't do their part for them. So you ask the questions and you let them do their part. Answer the questions, wrestle with the truth, try and figure out what they're supposed to do with this information, right? So thanks for watching this. And the next video, again, we're going to get into heart questions and hands questions.